In the realm of chess, Magnus Carlsen is renowned as one of the premier players. His proficiency in endgame tactics, strategic acumen, and the ability to destroy his opponents makes him so capable that he made a winning streak of 125 matches in a row. They say Magnus can think 20 moves ahead. Meanwhile, I'm over here struggling to remember where I put my last move. However, when pitted against the Chinese chess grandmaster YangYi, a three-time Chinese chess champion, boasting a peak rating of 2,765, the dynamics of the game take an intriguing turn. YangYi's extensive achievements include securing a gold medal for China in the 41st Chess Olympiad in 2014, solidifying his status as a formidable force in the chess world. Magnus Carlsen kicks off the chess showdown with a stylish pawn to e4, and his challenger, YangYi, responds in kind with a move to e5. Magnus, always the strategic maestro, advances his knight to f3, prompting YangYi to mirror the maneuver with a knight to f6. In a daring move, Magnus snatches the pawn on e5 with his knight, but YangYi retaliates by pressuring the knight with a pawn, leaving Magnus with no choice but to reclaim his bounty. Unfazed, YangYi takes the offensive by capturing Magnus's pawn on e4 with his own knight. The optimal move for Magnus in this situation would be achieving the pawn to d3. However, instead of challenging the formidable knight, Magnus chooses to advance his pawn to h3. YangYi responds by advancing his own pawn, fortifying the position of his knight. Magnus then opts to push the knight back by making the straightforward move of pawn to d3. As expected, YangYi retreats his knight, and Magnus follows up with the move c4. YangYi facilitates his plan by deploying his bishop to e7, creating a path for kingside castling. Capitalizing on this, Magnus seizes the opportunity and captures the pawn on d5 with his own pawn. In response, YangYi promptly castles kingside to execute his strategic maneuver. Magnus advances his knight to c3, and in counterplay, YangYi introduces b5 into the mix. Following several developing moves, Magnus maneuvers his bishop to e2 in preparation for castling. In response, YangYi advances his knight to d7. Rather than opting for castling, Magnus surprises by advancing his knight to e5, aiming for a trade. However, YangYi has alternative plans and declines the trade, opting to move his bishop to attack Magnus's knight. After thinking for a minute and 15 seconds, Magnus advances his knight to c6, launching an attack on YangYi's queen. This move forces YangYi to neutralize the threat by capturing the knight with his bishop. Magnus retaliates by capturing back with his pawn, simultaneously targeting the black knight. YangYi responds by moving his knight to b6, and Magnus completes his kingside castling. A few moves later, YangYi begins a sequence of exchanges by capturing the knight on d5 with his bishop, and Magnus responds by recapturing with his pawn. YangYi continues his offensive strategy by capturing the pawn on d5 with his knight. Seizing the opportunity, Magnus positions his bishop on f3, and subsequently he places another bishop on f4, further developing his pieces. YangYi proposes a knight trade by moving his knight to d6, and Magnus promptly accepts the offer by capturing the knight with his bishop. This move enables YangYi to recapture with his queen, strategically setting the stage for a queen trade. After a brief pause, Magnus decides to engage in the trade, resulting in both queens being removed from the board. As both players navigate their pieces, Magnus executes a brilliant move by advancing his pawn to c4, compelling YangYi to capture it and creating an opportunity for Magnus to trade rooks. Following the exchange, Magnus advances his pawn to c7, putting pressure on the rook once again. YangYi retreats his rook in response, and Magnus capitalizes on the situation by swiftly moving his bishop to b7. This move serves the dual purpose of safeguarding the critical c8 square. Facing limited options, YangYi resorts to advancing his pawn to c3. Magnus, showcasing endgame prowess, advances his pawn to c8, promoting it to a queen. YangYi captures this new queen with his rook, providing an opportunity for Magnus to recapture with his bishop. As a result, Magnus now enjoys a significant advantage with a rook and a bishop, while YangYi is left with only a knight and some pawns. Magnus opts to attack YangYi's knight with his rook. Rather than retreating, YangYi counterattacks by targeting Magnus's bishop. This sequence enables Magnus to capture the knight, and YangYi reciprocates by capturing the bishop. With Magnus holding a commanding position, YangYi's chances hinge on the 3 pawns on the side of the board. However, Magnus dashes any remaining hopes by capturing one of these pawns with his king. Ultimately, YangYi concedes, and Magnus emerges as the victorious player.